Hey everyone, welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving deep into one of the most baffling and intriguing cases out there. The disappearance of Maura Murray.
A case that has captivated the internet for years.
Exactly, and we've got a ton of material to go through. Articles, forum posts, even some case files.
Enough to really try and get to the bottom of this, right?
Absolutely. So if you're already familiar with the basics, young nursing student vanishes after a car accident in the snowy White Mountains,
Right.
we're going to go way deeper to uncover why this case has become such an internet sensation.
I think the real heart of this case lies in understanding Maura's state of mind in the weeks leading up to February 9th, 2004. Because it wasn't just one single event, but a whole cascade that might have pushed her to a breaking point.
Yeah, like a snowball effect.
Right.
So let's start unpacking that. We know about the academic stress, the stolen credit card incident, even a car crash just days before she disappears.
Yeah.
How do those all fit together?
Well, imagine being a dedicated nursing student at UMass Amherst. But, like many students, she may have been struggling more than anyone realized.
Yeah, nursing school is no joke.
Right, super demanding. And then you add in the stolen credit card incident. She used it to order food, which is interesting in itself, right? It suggests a kind of impulsivity, desperation, maybe.
And then, of course, we have that car crash. Her father's car, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't just a fender bender either. The damage was pretty extensive.
Oh, wow.
And what's strange is there's no record of a sobriety test or even thorough documentation, really.
That's so strange, especially nowadays.
Right, totally. And that lack of info creates a huge question mark, right? Was she intoxicated? Was the crash somehow connected to her emotional state? We just don't know.
So many unknowns.
Yeah.
And that makes her actions on February 9th even more perplexing. Because on that day, she emails her professors and work about a fake family death, takes out cash, buys alcohol, picks up accident report forms. Sounds like she was preparing for something. But for what?
That is the big question.
Right.
These actions definitely suggest she may have been planning to leave or even to stage an accident. But then she drives north towards the isolated White Mountains.
So confusing. It's as if there were two separate plans colliding in her mind.
Exactly. And then that's where things take a dramatic turn. Freezing night, she crashes her car on this deserted stretch of Route 112 and then, poof, gone. Vanished.
Wow.
We have Faith Westman, the witness who sees the crash and calls 911. And then there's Butch Atwood, the bus driver, who stops to check on Maura. She refuses his help, saying she's already called AAA.
Did she actually call AAA?
Well, that's another mystery because when the police arrive just minutes later, no Maura.
No Maura.
No Maura.
Wow. Okay, so the car's locked, her belongings are inside, there's a box of wine with stains that they initially thought was blood. It sounds like a scene from a thriller movie.
And that's really where the mystery begins.
Okay, so let's try and break down this scene. We have a locked car, some personal belongings inside, no Maura. What were the initial challenges for investigators in a case like this?
Well, first you got to think back to 2004.
Okay.
We didn't have the kind of cell phone tracking we have now or the security cameras everywhere.
Yeah, that makes things a lot harder.
Way harder. Plus, we're talking about the White Mountains in winter. Harsh weather, snow covering everything, sub-zero temperatures.
Affecting any potential evidence.
Big time. Snow obscures evidence. Those temperatures can really mess with decomposition rates.
So finding clues is that much harder.
Exactly. Plus, from what I've read, there was no DNA evidence besides Maura's own at the scene.
Really? Nothing at all.
That's one of the biggest frustrations with this case. DNA tech wasn't as advanced then, so they mostly just used it for direct matches, not for familial searching or the kind of genetic genealogy we see now.
So even if there were tiny bits of someone else's DNA, they couldn't really do much with it back then.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've got limited technology, a difficult environment, and no extra DNA to go on. It's no wonder this case went cold so quickly.
Yeah.
But there's also been a lot of talk about the police response, some missed opportunities in the early investigation.
Yeah, there are definitely some valid criticisms about how things were handled at first. Like, the scene wasn't secured as well as it could have been, and maybe they dismissed the idea of foul play a little too quickly.
Because of her emotional state and everything.
Right, all those weird circumstances surrounding her disappearance.
So are we saying that the police messed up?
It's not about placing blame, really. But hindsight's 20/20. Back then, the thinking was, well, maybe she just took off, ran away to escape her problems, find some peace in the mountains.
It does seem kind of impulsive given what we know about her.
Right. Back then, the idea of a young woman voluntarily disappearing, it wasn't as uncommon as it might seem now. But then time goes on, still no sign of Maura, and that foul play possibility becomes much harder to ignore.
And that leads us to all those theories.
All right.
Everything from an accident to abduction, even staging her own disappearance.
It's a case that just begs for an explanation. When you don't have clear answers, theories just pop up everywhere.
A fill void.
Exactly. So let's look at some of the main ones. First, you have the voluntary disappearance theory. On the surface, it's pretty compelling. Maura had a lot of stress in her life. Maybe she just wanted to start over somewhere new.
But wouldn't she have packed more if she was planning to disappear? Take more supplies, more money? It doesn't sound like she was prepared to be gone for that long.
You're right. And the fact that she hasn't touched her bank accounts, used her social security number, or contacted her family in over 2 decades, that makes it much less likely she's living a new life somewhere.
So then we go to foul play.
Which is always possible in a case like this, for sure.
Especially with that remote location and the small window of time between when she was last seen and when the police arrived.
Right. Someone could have easily abducted her in that short time. But there's still that lack of physical evidence. That's a big hurdle. You'd think if there was a struggle, there'd be signs, right? Footprints, tire tracks, something. And then, even if she was taken, where would they have taken her? The White Mountains are huge.
And rugged.
Super rugged. They've done extensive searches, even sonar scans of nearby waterways. But nothing, no trace of her.
And then there was that whole thing about the knife that was found.
Oh, right. The brother of this guy, who was considered a person of interest, claimed he'd found a knife that belonged to his brother. Thought maybe it was connected to Maura's disappearance. It was a big lead. But the DNA testing was inconclusive.
Yeah.
And the suspect wouldn't take a polygraph.
So back to square one. What about the theory that maybe it was an accident? Exposure to the elements, it was freezing that night, and what if she wandered off disoriented or something?
It's definitely a possibility, but again, that lack of physical evidence is a problem. If she had died from hypothermia, wouldn't her body have been found by now? They even brought in search dogs, and they couldn't pick up her scent leading away from the crash site.
So all these theories, none of them perfectly explaining everything. And then you add in all the online stuff, the speculation about local involvement, the bus driver, the contractor. It's a lot.
It really is. The internet plays such a unique role in Maura Murray's case,
It's one of the first to really explode in the social media age.
Totally. And that creates its own set of problems. Online communities can help keep these cases in the public eye, maybe even generate new leads, but they can also be breeding grounds for misinformation.
Like we see with a lot of true crime cases these days.
For sure. The line between genuine interest and obsessive sleuthing can get really blurry. And sometimes that pursuit of answers, it does more harm than good.
It's crazy to think it's been over 2 decades since Maura disappeared. And yet this case still has such a hold on people. Why do you think that is? What makes this story stick with us?
That's a question I think about a lot myself, to be honest. And I think it's kind of a perfect storm of intrigue, You've got this young woman just starting her adult life, dealing with all these personal struggles.
And then she vanishes.
Vanishes without a trace. And in a place that already has a sense of mystery about it, the White Mountains.
Yeah, it feels like something out of a book or a movie, doesn't it?
Totally.
Yeah.
But the difference is this isn't fiction. It's someone's real life, a family who's left with this huge void.
That never goes away.
Exactly. And I think that's a huge part of why it stays with us. We can all imagine how awful it would be to have someone we love go missing. The not knowing, the constant wondering.
It's terrifying.
It is. Maura's story just taps into something very primal, that fear of the unknown that we all have.
And then you've got the whole puzzle aspect too, right? The internet's full of theories and speculation and all these armchair detectives trying to crack the case.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Our brains are wired for certainty, and when we're faced with something that doesn't make sense, we try to fill in those gaps ourselves. Theories give us a way to try and make sense of it all, even if those theories aren't always true.
Yeah, and like we talked about earlier, we have to be careful about that. It's okay to be drawn to the mystery, but we have to approach these cases with respect and sensitivity. There's a real family at the heart of this. Their pain isn't some game for us to solve.
Absolutely. It's easy to get caught up in the intellectual challenge, the detective work, but we can't forget the human cost.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into Maura Murray's disappearance, what are some of the key takeaways you hope our viewers will keep in mind?
Well, I think the biggest thing is just to remember Maura herself. She wasn't just a name in a missing persons report. She was a real person, a young woman with her whole life ahead of her. And her disappearance deserves to be taken seriously.
And even though we might never know exactly what happened to her, her story is still so powerful, and it can teach us a lot, can't it?
Definitely. It's a reminder that even with all our technology and information, some mysteries may just never be fully solved. But that doesn't mean we stopped looking for answers or that we stop fighting for better systems for missing persons and their families.
Because Moore's case has had a ripple effect, hasn't it? It's sparked conversations about how missing persons cases are handled, about law enforcement, about the ethics of true crime.
It has. And that conversation needs to continue. We have to keep pushing for improvements, for more resources, for greater awareness and understanding.
Yeah, that's so important. So even though there's still uncertainty, we can still find meaning and purpose in all of this. We can honor Moore's memory by continuing to search for the truth, by advocating for change, and by supporting those who are working to bring families of missing persons some kind of closure.
I couldn't have said it better myself. It's been really great getting to explore this case with you. I hope everyone watching has learned something new about Maura's disappearance and that they'll think more about the importance of empathy and responsibility when engaging with true crime.
Thanks for joining us today, everyone. If you found this deep dive insightful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into all kinds of fascinating topics. And be sure to check out the links in the description for more information about Moore's case. Until next time, stay curious and keep searching for knowledge.